Okay, let's go through this project and how it gets done. So I'm going to build a beat, and these are the steps that you're going to take to build your own beat. And what you get may be like this, it may be something totally different. But this is an example of a completed build a beat project. So let's make a new project, and to do that, of course, I'm going to save this, build a beat demo, and then I'm going to go and make a new project. Empty project, audio track. I'm going to turn off this view down here, the smart controls. And I'm going to go to my Finder, click on Downloads, and find my Build a Beat samples, which you will have downloaded from Schoology. Drag them into your project, and now you see you have a bunch of samples. A sample is just a digitally recorded sound. Okay, I'm going to turn off my metronome so that sounds a little bit more normal. Okay, I'm asking you guys to start with 110 as your tempo. I'm asking you to create 4 new tracks so that you can put the different instruments or sounds each on its own track, and then you can build your beat from those. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. This is where you zoom, up here on the top corner. Zooming in and out is going to be really important as you go on. So let's hear the first sound. Okay, that's the hi-hat. I'm only going to need one of those. Next sound. Okay, 2 snare drum beats. Again, I'm only going to need one. Kick drum beat. I'm only going to need one. And then I've got 3 different percussion instruments, and you can use those however you want. Okay, so it's like a, first one was a cowbell. That's called a clave beat. It's like a side stick on the snare drum. And then a cymbal, a ride cymbal sound. Okay, so how do I cut these up? This is something that people seem to get stuck on, and we're going to look at it. First of all, I did say make new tracks, one for each instrument, okay? To make a new track, well, to name a track, you double click on the name. I'm going to call the first one hi-hat. So I'm renaming this track. Okay, and then I'm going to go make a new track. You can go file, you can go track, new track, or you can just say plus, add an audio track, say create. Okay, I'm just going to make 2 more, and then I'm going to rename them. So I've already got hi-hat. I'm going to make this one kick, snare, percussion. Now, as you're working and watching this, just pause it anytime you need to so you can go back to GarageBand and do the things that you just saw me do. Hi-hat has all of the sounds on it. I need to break this up, split them up, move them around. How do you split it up? You have to have it selected. So I just clicked on the region, and that's what this is called. And I'm going to go and get my one snare, my one hi-hat note that I want, and then I'm going to cut everything else away. So there's my note. You can see it, right? That's the waveform. That shows you where the sound is. The hi-hat's not as big as the snare, but it's still there. You can see it. So then I'm going to just go up to here-ish. Doesn't matter really where you go, as long as you're out past the end of the sound. And I'm going to cut it. How do you cut it? Edit, split region at playhead. Okay? This is a region, like I said. You're going to split it here at this playhead, where the playhead is. Okay, so I'm putting it right here on the 1, 2. That is measure 1, beat 2. Edit split regions at playhead. Okay, so now I've got a hi-hat beat. The sound begins right at the beginning of the region. So that's perfect. Now I'm going to isolate my snare sound. Okay, I need to get this as close to the beginning as possible. Very important. Get it as close to the beginning of the region as possible. So I'm zooming in to where I can really see that whole snare beat in the waveform, and I'm going to move my playhead right to the beginning. That's perfect right there, and I'm going to say edit split regions at playhead. I'm actually just going to start clicking Command T because that's the same thing. You see it says Command T right there. So if I'm placed here, I'll say Command T and then zoom back out. All right, like I said, it's all about zooming in and out. So here's my first hi-hat. That's the second hi-hat. I don't need it. I'm just going to cut this snare drum about here, right? So I've got the beginning lined up perfectly, and then I cut at the tail and I bring it down to snare. This is another snare drum beat. I don't need that one. I've already got one here. So I'm going to go on to my kick drum. Can I get right to the beginning? Yeah, I can, but I just got to make sure that I am zoomed in enough to make that a nice clean cut at the beginning of the region. Let's say you forgot to do that, right? Let's say you brought a region in. I'm going to cut it here at the end, and you've got a region here for your kick drum. And you bring it in, and you're like, oh, look at that sound. It's not really at the beginning of the region. It needs to be at the beginning of the region. Yeah, you can go in here and cut it and delete that first part, but you can also just grab the trim tool, which is putting the playhead over there in the bottom corner, and pull it in to wherever it needs to go. As always, I'm going to zoom in to make it nice and precise. I don't want to cut anything off. I just want to start right before that. Okay, again, zoom out. Bring that here. And then finally, I've got something else further down here, which is that's the extra kick drum that I don't need. So I'm just going to trim that right out. And then I've got all these percussion instruments, and I'll put those down here on the percussion track. You can drag it over here. Try that again. And I'm going to mute the percussion track for a moment. See, that's the mute button right there. If you want to solo something so you only hear that instrument, you hit the solo, and that mutes everything else. So there's mute, which cuts a track out of the sound temporarily, and there's solo, which cuts all the other sounds, all the other tracks out of the sound temporarily. Now you need to build your beat. I've got all my instruments, hi-hat, kick, snare, and I need to place them in the right place. I've got that video in the Schoology folder for you, which reminds you how to build a beat. Snare drum on 2 and 4, kick drum on 1 and 3. Is this ringing any bells? Okay, and hi-hat is on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so let's orient ourselves. Everything needs to stay on the grid in the right places. So once you remember that, everything gets very easy, but you got to remember that part. And in order to build beats, you have to make the regions the right length, and you have to make them land on the grid in the right spot. So again, remember 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this is the end of our first measure. If the snare is on 2 and 4, then let's just take that. You can copy and paste it, or you can press Option, click it, see the little green plus that shows up? I can just drag that down to 4. Okay, this one is already on 1, not on 2. So I'm going to drag this without copying it and just move it to 2. So now it's on 2 and 4. That's the definition of a backbeat. Where does the kick go? Well, you should remember, or you should watch that video, and then you'll know that it goes on 1 and 3. Okay, so you hear the 1 and 3. And the 2 and 4. We're almost there. We just got to get our hi-hat in. Now a hi-hat has to play twice every beat, right? The beats are 1, 2, 3, 4. So to make that happen, the easiest way to do it is to make it loop. Now if I loop it here, right, if I've got this thing the length of one entire beat, the hi-hat that is, it's going to loop so that it plays 4 times in the measure. But we want it to play 8 times, right? It plays 8 notes. I mean, that's a decent beat. It's a nice sounding beat, but that's not the backbeat that I'm looking for. Backbeat that I'm looking for is you unloop it and then you trim it. So I went on the upper right to loop, bottom right to trim. That's a really important difference. So if I'm going to trim this down to the right length so that when I loop it, it's the right size loop, then I go to the bottom right, go to the trim, and just end it halfway between beat 1 and beat 2. That means there's going to be 8 of them between measure 1 and measure 2. So now that it is half the length of this beat, it will loop out so that it loops exactly 8 times. See how those those notches are falling right onto the grid? So now it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Go back to the beginning. We're at the beginning and let's play it. Okay. Backbeat built. Now you have your percussion down here. I think for this project you should maybe do 4 full measures. So if I zoom out, watch how easy 4 measures is to build. I can just select everything, press Option, make sure that you're not on the loop but on one of the actual first regions of the loop, press Option, and copy it. That is to say Option, click, drag. I'm placing these exactly on each measure. So now I've got 4 measures of backbeat. I can change things around, right? I don't really need to hear 4 measures of exactly the same backbeat. So what's one thing you could do? You could go to the second hi-hat, and make these 16th notes instead of 8th notes. How do you do that? Start by zooming in. Okay, so here I am on the second beat, the second measure of the 4 measures. Okay, and I've got second measure beats 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to unloop this, pull it all the way in, and then pull it in even further. I got to trim it with the bottom right. And now it is on, there's basically going to be 4 of these in every beat. Okay, that means 4 in this beat, 4 in the second beat, 4 in the third beat, 4 in the fourth beat. I've still got my snare drum on 2 and 4, kick drum on 1 and 3, but now I've got 16 hi-hat notes, so it's going to sound more like a disco beat. In fact, if I really want to make it sound like a disco beat, well, let's listen to it, what we got now. Okay, sounds pretty mechanical because it is. If I put those kick drums on 1, 2, 3, and 4, in other words, I could just loop this, or I could Option drag it. I now have what's called 4 on the floor. All 4 beats on the kick drum. You don't hear it so well because of the snare drum there, but if you're in the club, you feel it. If you got a big speaker playing it, you feel that boom, 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 boom. Okay, zoom back out. I could go against the grain, like I did in my sample that I played you at the beginning, and turn the beat around for a minute. So I could, instead of kick drum on 1 and 3 and snare drum on 2 and 4, I could just swap them. So I'm going to move that snare drum from 2 to 1, move that kick drum from 1 to 2, and see how that sounds. And I'm going to add some percussion before I'm finished. So again, let's solo the percussion and listen to it. Okay, I'm just going to stick with the side stick. Okay, it's a little loud, so I'm going to turn it down here, and I'm going to zoom in to make it an exact cut at the beginning of the region. Again, that's what you have to do to make any one of these regions work for you on the grid. Okay, zoom out, and now I can take that and place it anywhere I want. So let's bring it down to the 4th measure, 3rd measure, 4th measure, and I'm just going to go one, 2, 3, 4, but I'm just going to place this on the count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cut this out. Turn on my loop for all 4 bars. Turn off solo and off mute. And let's listen to what we've got. Okay, got my 4 bars done. Export it, share, export song to disk. Make sure, I probably should have saved this project just to show you that that's always what you do. But don't just click export, right? You need to choose where you're putting it. So I'm going to call this build a beat demo 2. I'm going to go to my documents. I'm going to go to my folder, and I'm going to make a new folder, if you don't have one already, called build a beat. Say create, wave file, BAB demo 2, export, upload it to Padlet, and you're done.